Well, thanks for joining us for your 5+ weekend wrap. I'm Morgan Wrigley. We're taking a look at the week's top headlines. Now, first, lawmakers are reacting to the closing of the legislative session and looking back on the progress that was made. The top Republican in the Arkansas Senate says he views the 95th General Assembly legislative session as very successful, while the top Democrat in the Arkansas House says excessive spending was geared toward misguided principles. While the two sides continue to clash over issues like prison spending and the direct democracy process, there were moments of bipartisan cooperation.
Arkansas Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders signed hundreds of bills into law during the latest legislative session.
I define this session as promises kept to the people of Arkansas.
President pro tempore of the Arkansas State Senate, Bart Hester, says enhancing penalties for illegal immigrants who commit felonies and securing $75 million for a new prison in Franklin County were priorities he says he was glad to see get through.
The legislature saw fit to give the Department of Corrections $75 million. That's more than enough money to do the architect, engineer, and some dirt work, and probably most importantly, get a firm bid.
Meanwhile, Arkansas House Democratic leader Andrew Collins says money spent on a new prison does not attack the root of the problem.
What we've done instead of focusing on reducing crime is building more prisons. We have an overcrowding problem, but the problem comes from having too many crimes be committed.
Collins says this legislative session will be remembered for power grabs, excessive spending, and hot-button national issues trickling into Arkansas politics.
Number one is the spending on what I would consider to be misguided priorities.
He says new ballot initiative canvassing laws, such as requiring signers to show photo ID and forcing volunteers to read aloud the ballot title, chilled the direct democracy process.
There was a concerted effort to gum up the works on that process and really essentially make it nearly impossible. It was already difficult, but now it's nearly impossible to get a popular initiated act or constitutional amendment on the ballot.
There were moments, however, of bipartisan support on laws, including the passing of universal free breakfast for public school students.
It's going to be a great thing, great for health outcomes, great for educational outcomes for kids in our state.
As well as improvements to maternal health through the Healthy Moms and Healthy Babies Act, expanding Arkansas Medicaid coverage for pregnant and new mothers. Both lawmakers agreed that party labels won't get in the way of helping Arkansans.
It's really important that we work well together. Look, we are not Washington, D.C. here in Arkansas. I don't find it offensive when I can work with my colleagues across the aisle. In fact, I think the people of Arkansas expect that and they want it.
Well, he was not able to secure all the money for the prison. Hester says he will try to get those funds secured by the fiscal session early next year. While the legislative session is over, Governor Sanders has the power to call the General Assembly into a special session if necessary. And Governor Sanders also signed legislation this week that makes Arkansas the 6th state to expand protections for kids with food allergies. It's called Elijah's Law, named in honor of a 3-year-old boy who was allergic to milk and was mistakenly given a grilled cheese sandwich. Elijah had a severe allergic reaction to the food. Since then, his family has made it their mission to raise food allergy awareness. The new law requires all child care programs in Arkansas to follow stringent food allergy guidelines to prevent, recognize, and respond to life-threatening reactions like the one Elijah had.
Laws like this are really important, will be help protect to make sure that we don't have another tragedy like we did with Elijah.
Elijah's father tells us that Missouri is also getting close to passing its own version of Elijah's Law. Arkansas's League of Women Voters is filing a lawsuit to block several new laws from taking effect. The laws are focused on the ballot initiative process. The lawsuit alleges that laws passed this past legislative session would violate the U.S. Constitution. It comes after 2 ballot initiatives introduced by the League of Women Voters were rejected by the Attorney General this year. You can read more about that lawsuit on our website, 5newsonline.com. And the Supreme Court heard arguments this week over the rights of parents in a Maryland school district to remove their children from elementary classes that include books with LGBTQ characters. Protesters gathered outside the Supreme Court this week as justices heard arguments in the case, pitting parents against the Montgomery County School District. They sued after the school system stopped allowing them to pull their children from lessons that included 5 books with LGBTQ-related themes. The plaintiffs say public schools cannot force kids to take part in instruction that violates their faith.
I think the board's lost its own case in many respects. And then in its briefs it said that, well, there were certain things that would opt kids out. If there were storybooks that portrayed a picture of the Prophet Muhammad, which would violate Muslims' beliefs, they would allow opt-outs from that storybook, but not from the storybook that those same Muslim parents might object to having their kids indoctrinated on matters of sexuality and gender. So the board's position is just highly inconsistent.
The suburban school district outside Washington, D.C. says it introduced the storybooks to better reflect the area's diverse population, and letting children opt out of those lessons was disruptive. A decision is expected on this by early summer. Well, here at home, a double murder suspect made his first court appearance this week in Fort Smith. Nefesh Ruach pleaded not guilty Wednesday to 2 charges of first-degree murder. The charges stem from a deadly shooting earlier this month outside the Foxfire Club that claimed the lives of Brian Jones and Todd Jewell. Ruach is being held in the Sebastian County Jail while he awaits trial. In Arkansas, Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders is also speaking out about one of the bills she signed into law this year. It allows the use of nitrogen gas for executions. She said last weekend that the state's not in a rush to resume executions. When asked about a timeline, the governor said the issue requires careful consideration. She told the Associated Press, quote, "Anybody rushing into a decision like that doesn't understand the severity and responsibility." That statement by the governor gives an indication of the controversy that awaits if and when executions resume. It's been 8 years since Arkansas's last executions, when a group of inmates was put to death in April 2017 as the state's supply of a lethal injection drug was set to expire. One of those inmates was Liddell Lee. He was convicted and sentenced to death for the 1993 murder of Deborah Reese. But in 2020, 3 years after his death, new testing concluded that his DNA was not on evidence found at the scene. The same test also found DNA from an unknown male. Cases like this are why Representative Nicole Clowney says she voted against the nitrogen bill.
I am not presuming to know the truth of what happened in that particular case. But what I do know is that we spent a lot of time today talking about giving people, the worst criminals of the worst, what they deserve, and presuming that those are the only people who will be impacted by this bill if it becomes law. But they won't be. Because as long as humans are responsible for these decisions, we will get it wrong sometimes.
There are currently 24 inmates on death row in Arkansas. Well, 2 key issues involving money are being discussed in Crawford County. The sheriff's office looking into a program to house federal inmates in their county jail, and the controversy continues with who will foot the bill for legal fees in the library lawsuit. 5 News reporter Lauren Spencer has the latest from the Crawford County Quorum Court meeting on Monday.
And my staff decided that it would be a great opportunity for us to do that and also make extra revenue in that process.
Sheriff Daniel Perry aimed to get into a contract with the U.S. Marshals Service to house inmates in the county jail.
This would really increase our budget where we could afford things that we really need, like radios and equipment, guns, that type of stuff.
The U.S. Marshals Service would pay Crawford County $60 a day per inmate, and Sheriff Perry says they have the room.
It's a good deal because if we get full and we need extra space for local inmates, they will come immediately and come get them and relieve them.
But not all Quorum Court members are on board. The measure failed.
We've even received calls from those deputies in the sheriff's office, and it's overwhelmingly, they don't want this. First of all, the amount that is being offered is very low.
It just doesn't sound like that good of a deal. Like we could have done better.
We will likely have to call a special meeting in the coming weeks.
Crawford County has been ordered by a judge to pay $112,000 in legal fees tied to a lawsuit involving the public library system. In 2023, a group of parents sued the county and library leaders after LGBTQ books meant for children were moved into the adult section. A judge later ruled the books must be returned to their original location. Now the plaintiffs have filed another lawsuit, this time to stop Crawford County from using the library's budget to pay the legal fees. In Crawford County, covering news where you live, Lauren Spencer, 5 News.
The National Weather Service says a tornado touched down on Easter Sunday in Fayetteville. This is video captured from a Ring doorbell camera when the tornado hit the Hugh Mount Village neighborhood in northwest Fayetteville. Survey teams say they confirmed the storm produced an EF1 rated tornado. Here's some Sky 5 video showing some of the damage that left behind. The storm packed winds of over 100 miles per hour, ripping roofs on several homes in its path. And after nearly a year of recovering from the damage of the Memorial Day tornadoes in Rogers, businesses are finally returning to normal. And a local art gallery that was damaged is reopening its doors. 5 News reporter Rachel Williams shows us a sneak peek.
Nonprofit organization Artists of Northwest Arkansas built a name for themselves in this community for 25 years. Since 2021, the organization was leasing a gallery at the Experimental House in downtown Rogers until a tornado tore through the city.
They had damage on the top, windows got blown in, that type of thing. None of our artwork got damaged, so luckily none of that happened. But it did close down everything, and we were waiting for it to be reopened. And finally, the leasing company finally just said, nope, we're not going to be able to get it done.
Leaving them nowhere to go. ANA President Stan Dark says an artist and member within the nonprofit offered a new location just 2 blocks from the Experimental House.
He came up and he says, what are we doing, on the building? I said, well, we're just sort of looking around right now, trying to see what we can do. And he said, well, my building's open if you're wanting to look at it. And I said, yes, by all means.
Dark says the nonprofit has been in this space since January, but there was still work to be done.
But we wanted to make sure that all the building was done, to get the signage up, the landscaping, and be able to get all our things finished up and done. So we decided to hold it off for a couple of months.
And now members of Artists of Northwest Arkansas are gearing up for the grand opening.
On Friday, April 25th, from 5 to 8 p.m., Zeke Taylor, who's from Eureka Springs, is going to come and speak. He's going to talk about arts and the arts in the community. We've got caterers coming in, and we've got live music, and we've sent out invitations.
In Rogers, covering news where you live, Rachel Williams, 5 News.
More than 2,000 Tawnytown residents joined together to file a class action lawsuit against the Eco Vista landfill for the release of toxic smells into the area. Residents in the Tawnytown area have spoken out for years against the expansion of the landfill because of potential threats to air and water quality. Now they filed a lawsuit claiming chemicals well over regional limits are being emitted from the landfill, making residents sick, leading to hospital visits, along with the smell that's forcing residents to stay inside. According to the lawsuit, an air test from the Arkansas Department of Environmental Quality, or ADEQ, found the chemical acrolein was 4,900% over the regional screening level. Another chemical, benzene, was 209% over. Health experts say even short-term exposure at levels that high can cause nausea, headaches, unconsciousness, and more. Residents claim the landfill does not follow proper practices when handling those chemicals. But even with the community's constant pushback over the last few years, Ken Osborne, the lawyer representing the plaintiffs, says their work is just beginning.
Community has had multiple meetings with various government agencies trying to get some type of relief, but none of those have been successful. As far as what we're doing is we're trying to do it through the courts, which to my knowledge has not been tried at this point. So it's a different avenue of relief that we hope is successful.
We reached out to Arkansas Waste Management for an interview with no response. The plaintiffs in the lawsuit demand that the case go before a jury trial. And as we approach 1 year since the 2024 Memorial Weekend tornadoes, some residents say they expected a quicker recovery for the Rogers Public Library. Repairs at the library are not expected to be done until the end of the year. At Tuesday night's City Council meeting, one Rogers teacher brought up concerns that students will have less access to resources if the library closes for a second summer. Tiffany Cawley teaches 3rd grade at Reagan Elementary. She mentioned 10 out of 13 Rogers Public Schools are Title I, meaning at least 50% of students at those schools are on free or reduced lunch. Cawley says lower poverty students rely on resources like the public library for opportunities to read over the summer. We spoke with Rogers Public Schools Superintendent Dr. Jeff Perry, who says they're working to make sure students in underfunded areas still have access.
We have a converted van, and we ended up taking some of our books on that van that we pull from libraries. Those teachers will go around to different areas and stop the bus, students be able to get on that bus, and then they're able to check out books.
According to the city's website, they're still waiting on pre-approval from FEMA to reimburse 75% of the money used to replace the library's roof. City says drawings from engineers will be finished by the end of the month, and a bid for a contractor will start late next month. Well, Northwest Arkansas is a magnet for big business, and there's a growing demand for high-skilled workers. On Wednesday, leaders from some of the state's leading institutions sat down together to map out the future. A big topic of the discussion was how to best serve every student. Presidents and chancellors from the institutions there said whether you're an 18-year-old senior or a mid-career worker ready for a change, one of their campuses should be able to meet you where you are. Hundreds of community leaders gathered for the roundtable hosted by Northwest Arkansas Council. It was the latest stop in UCA's NWA Blitz. The University of Arkansas and Northwest Arkansas Community College were also there at the table. School leaders discussed how to work together to keep the talent pipeline flowing and strengthen the local economy. Houston Davis, president of UCA, says employers looking to fill high-demand jobs want workers who can keep learning long after graduation.
The number one thing that we hear from employers is that they're wanting to make certain that they've got someone who comes with a good base of understanding, but also is teachable. There's somebody that knows how to grow into roles. With the rapid evolution of the work world, you have to know that whatever field you go into, there's going to be expectation that you continue to be committed to your education and be trainable.
Davis says boosting the workforce starts long before college. He says Arkansas needs to keep K-12 classes rigorous and relevant while working with higher education institutions to make sure every student, no matter what kind of certification or degree they want, has a clear, flexible path beyond high school. Well, the Arkansas Department of Health confirmed another measles case in Arkansas. That brings the total number of cases in Arkansas this year to 3. No information has been made available about the third patient. The first 2 cases were in central Arkansas earlier this month. But the Arkansas Department of Health is issuing a warning after a person from out of state that was infected with measles was in the city. Here's a look at the 2 locations that ADH listed as the exposure sites: Mercy Hospital and Best Friends Pet Clinic. They say the infected person made stops at both of those locations in the past week. They're urging anyone who may have been exposed to get up to date on their MMR vaccine and to monitor symptoms, which can take 3 weeks to develop. The health department says the patient was at Mercy Hospital on Saturday, April 19th from 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. and Best Friends Pet Clinic on Monday night from 5 to 8. Anyone who was at those locations on Saturday and Monday could have been exposed to measles. Well, it's a new era in college athletics where student athletes can finally cash in on their talent on and off the field with name, image, and likeness policy, or NIL, shaking up the game in ways no one expected. Arkansas quarterback Madden Iamaleava is transferring to UCLA, but the university is asking the player to return the NIL money. We heard from Pete Nakos with On3 Sports that the Arkansas NIL Collective is demanding around $200,000 back from the QB transfer. We spoke with a lawyer and NFL agent who says in these types of situations, it's still unclear who actually foots the bill.
I assume that it will track exactly how college coaches that have buyouts, and in the college coaching world, sometimes the university, the new university will pay the buyout. Sometimes the new university says, no, we're not. We'll offer you a job, but you have to pay all the buyout completely yourself.
Lawyer and NFL agent J.R. Carroll does not know the details of Madden's case, but says in these type of situations, it's case by case on who would pay the $200,000. Carroll says for NIL contracts, they're normally 10 to 11 months.
It literally is a living document that has changed year by year by year. When they first started, there was none of the precautionary language that you're seeing in contracts now. And by precautionary language, what I'm saying is now that the universities are putting language in where they can claw back money if a individual signs a contract and then a few months later jumps back into the transfer portal before ever playing a down for his university.
This is the case for Arkansas early enrollee freshman Madden Maliava, who is entering the portal after spending just spring camp with the Hogs. The former four-star recruit will be joining his brother Nico at UCLA, the school he originally committed to before flipping to Arkansas, a school that, while we may not know the exact amount, likely offered a lot of money to acquire his talents.
What you're seeing now is a completely free market, one of the few areas that are completely unregulated, which means that you can contract in any way, shape, or form that you want. And now you're starting to see universities contract in which to protect themselves. You can see that individual making somewhere between $5,000 and $10,000 a month from January to the transfer portal, and then after the transfer portal, the university obviously has to catch up to meet that $500,000 number, so you can see monthly stipends of $80,000 to $90,000.
But how can the University of Arkansas avoid the situation from happening again?
What you have to do is what it looks like that Arkansas had just done, which is place responsibility with the reward. And if you don't stay, there are consequences.
Researchers at the U of A are working on innovative solutions to combat the growing plastic pollution crisis. From the Milo J. Schultz Agricultural Research and Extension Center, 5 News reporter Jose Carranza shares how.
Researchers from around the world provided a holistic report rethinking single-use plastics. That includes research from right here at the U of A's Agricultural Research Center. The numbers are staggering. Global plastic production has increased from 369 million tons in 2016 to more than 404 million metric tons in 2020. Researchers say about a third of all plastic produced is used for packaging, including single-use food containers. Scientists say microplastics put the issue beyond landfills. Researchers are finding microplastics, particles smaller than 5 millimeters, in waterways, and these particles carry toxic chemicals that can threaten wildlife and human health. Here at the U of A, Dr. Sun Ferreira, a food scientist, is exploring solutions through biodegradable plastics.
We call biofilms. When these films degrade, they will return to their natural state, which is fairly similar to how they are found in nature, not as a microplastics in this scenario.
Dr. Ferreira emphasizes that while these biodegradable alternatives are promising, they're likely 5 to 10 years away from a widespread adoption. That's why in the meantime, he encourages consumers to follow a expanded recycling slogan that's rethink, refuse, reduce, reuse, repair, and then recycle. In Fayetteville, covering news where you live, Jose Carranza, 5 News.
Well, Education Department says that starting May 5th, it will begin collecting payments for student loans that are in default. According to the department, more than 5 million borrowers are in default, and 4 million more could be in the same position in a few months. For those who are behind on their payments, that could mean wage garnishment or money withheld from tax refunds and Social Security benefits. CBS News business analyst Jill Schlesinger says those borrowers need to pay attention.
All of the people in default, we are now seeing reporting to credit agencies. We haven't seen that before. Wow. So we now know that credit scores are dropping for these borrowers by somewhere around 130 points.
The department says less than 40% of borrowers are current on their student loan payments. The Arkansas Financial Fraud Task Force met for the first time just minutes after the state attorney general introduced the group. The task force brings together people from industries most impacted by fraud, like the Arkansas Bankers Association and the Arkansas Credit Union Association. The group will meet quarterly to share information with the attorney general's office that it will then use to track down suspects and also focus on fraud prevention.
So I think the education piece is the most important aspect of this, just getting that information out to the public so that they're aware and that they don't fall prey to these scams. And you know, you always think that you would never fall prey to something like that, but I think we all know people who have personally fallen prey, and we hear these stories all the time. So I think that's the really important piece, is that educational aspect.
Attorney General Tim Griffin says the task force will be an ongoing development. And a new report from the Federal Trade Commission shows consumers reported losing more than $12.5 billion to fraud last year, which represents a 25% increase over the prior year. At the same time, people nationwide are receiving voicemails that seem innocent, but experts are warning they're a scam.
When Brittany Taglarina received a call from a number she didn't recognize, she sent it to voicemail.
Hey there, this is Jessica again.
Jessica claimed to be with a loan processing center.
I've been trying to reach out to you regarding your loan application, but we haven't been able to connect yet.
The message left a number to call back.
When I first heard the voicemail, I initially thought it might have had something to do with my car loan, but what kind of stuck out to me the most was that they said call back by 5 p.m. Pacific time, which I thought was a little strange because my car loan is not on the Pacific coast.
Taglarina realized it was fake when she kept receiving the same exact call from different numbers.
I decided to report it to the Better Business Bureau.
And she's far from alone. The organization says their scam tracker has received hundreds of complaints about the calls from Jessica.
It's a classic phishing scam.
The BBB's Melanie McGovern says this type of scam is often looking for personal information.
We know our social security numbers are very valuable to scammers, so giving up that information, unfortunately, could open you up to identity theft.
Taglarina is glad she reported it.
If I could just prevent one other person from potentially getting scammed, it might help.
Authorities say reporting a scam can help others avoid it and can shut down the scammers. Katie Weiss, CBS News, New Orleans.
Less than 2 weeks away from the start of the Real ID requirement, the state is doing what it can to make the process easier for Arkansans. Starting May 7th, anyone traveling by plane or entering a federal building will need the new ID or an acceptable alternative, like a U.S. passport. The Arkansas Department of Finance and Administration expects demand for the licenses to be high ahead of the start date. To help with that, the agency opened 5 revenue offices on Saturday. A list of cities are right there on your screen: Little Rock, Fayetteville, Jonesboro, Texarkana, and Monticello. An office in each town will open at 8 and close at 4:30, and they will only be issuing real IDs. Officials are urging Arkansans to get this taken care of, especially ahead of summer.
If you're traveling late in the summer, just make sure you come by our office and get that done before you hop on an airplane. I don't want anybody going to the airport and getting turned away and having their travel plans frustrated because you don't have a real ID and you need to be able to have one in order to travel.
To give you an idea of the demand the state is seeing, the DFA says it's issued about 140,000 real IDs since January 1st. The agency says every revenue office in the state is equipped to issue the license and encourages anyone with questions to visit ar.gov/real ID. TSA and XNA also held a Real ID briefing Thursday, as residents who want to board an airplane for a domestic flight will need to be Real ID compliant by that May 7th deadline. If their driver's license is not Real ID compliant, they'll need another form of approved identification. Again, like that can be a passport to board their flight or to enter a secure federal facility or military base.
Our message is, don't panic. There's lots of other ways to present a Real ID. You can also go to all our social media platforms with TSA and Ask TSA, where you can ask a question of a uniformed officer and get a response within the hour and generally in 3 minutes or less.
The Real ID driver's license and identification card has a small star in the upper right corner to indicate that the license meets federal regulations that establish minimum security standards. For all the information you need to know about Real IDs, you can visit our website at 5newsonline.com. Well, thank you for watching the 5 Plus Weekend Wrap. And while you're here on 5 Plus, you can check out our latest newscast, weather impact forecast on demand, along with other original content from our 5 News team. Have a great weekend.